Agartha, the Kingdom of Inner Earth, Hollow Earth Hypothesis. Agartha, sometimes Agartha, Agarthi or Agartha, is a legendary city that is said to reside in the Earth's core. It is related to the Hollow Earth theory and is a popular subject in esotericism. Agartha is one of the most common names cited for the society of underground dwellers. Shambhala, also known as Shambhala or Shangri-La, is sometimes said to be its capital city. The mythical paradise of Shambhala is known under many different names. It has been called the Forbidden Land, the Land of White Waters, the Land of Radiant Spirits, the Land of Living Fire, the Land of the Living Gods and the Land of Wonders. Hindus have known it as Aryavartha, literally, the land or realm of the Aryans, the land of the noble, worthy ones, the land from which the Vedas come, the Chinese as Sityen, the Western paradise of Zhuangmu, the royal mother of the West, the Russian Old Believers, a 19th-century Christian sect, knew it as Belivodai and the Kyrgyz people as Janadar. But throughout Asia it is best known by its Sanskrit name, Shambhala, meaning the place of peace, of tranquility. While once a popular concept, in the last century little serious attention has been paid to these conjectures, with the possibly apocryphal exception of Adolf Hitler, and the theory is not supported by modern science. The idea of subterranean worlds may have been inspired by ancient religious beliefs in Hades, Sheol, and Hell. Ferdinand Antonius Sandalski's 1920 book Beasts, Men, and Gods also discusses Agartha. The myth of Agartha is also known as Shambhala, as it was known in India, the underworld realm peopled by initiates and led by the masters who are the spiritual leaders of humanity. Agartha is the great Asian university of the initiates of the greater mysteries. Their Mahatma, Great Soul, who is also known as the Lord of the World, plays the part of the supreme spiritual leader of humanity. According to Alexander Saint-Yves d'Alveigre, 1842–1909, of France, the secret world of Agartha and all of its wisdom and wealth will be accessible for all mankind, when Christianity lives up to the commandments which were once drafted by Moses and Jesus, meaning when the anarchy which exists in our world is replaced by the synarchy. Saint-Yves gives a lively description of Agartha in this book as if it were a place which really exists, situated in the Himalayas in Tibet. Saint-Yves' version of the history of Agartha is based upon revealed information, meaning received by Saint-Yves himself through attunement. Saint-Yves d'Alveigre created the archaeometer. Shambhala concept figures prominently in Vajrayana Buddhism and Tibetan Kalachakra teachings and revived in the West by Blavatsky and Theosophical Society. As with many concepts in Vajrayana Buddhism, the idea of Shambhala is said to have an outer, inner, and secret meaning. The outer meaning understands Shambhala to exist as a physical place, although only individuals with the appropriate karma can reach it and experience it as such. There are various ideas about where this society is located, but it is often placed in Central Asia, north of Tibet. The inner and secret meanings refer to more subtle understandings of what Shambhala represents, and are generally passed on orally. Alice Bailey transformed it into a kind of extra-dimensional or spiritual reality. The Roerichs see its existence as both spiritual and physical. The hollow earth or hollow planet theory is also supported by superconscious knowledge-based channeled sources of universal nature like Seth channeled by Jane Roberts, Rantha by J. Z. Knight and Itra by Anna. Other theories. An early source for the belief in underground civilizations is The Smoky God, 1908, by Willis George Emerson, 1856–1918, which claims to be the biography of a Norwegian sailor named Olaf Jansen. The book explains how Jansen's sloop sailed through an entrance to the Earth's interior at the North Pole. For 2 years he lived with the inhabitants of an underground network of colonies who, Emerson writes, were a full 12 feet tall and whose world was lit by a smoky central sun. Their capital city was said to be the original Garden of Eden. While Emerson does not use the name Agartha, later works such as Agartha, Secrets of the Subterranean Cities have identified the civilization Jansen encountered with Agartha, and its citizens as Agarthan. According to Secrets, Shambhala the Lesser, one of the colonies, was also the seat of government for the network. While Shambhala the Lesser is an inner continent, its satellite colonies are smaller enclosed ecosystems located just beneath the Earth's crust or discreetly within mountains. Cataclysms and wars taking place on the surface drove these people underground. These were said to include a lengthy Atlantean-Lemurian war and the use of thermonuclear weaponry that eventually sank and destroyed these two highly advanced civilizations. The Sahara, Gobi, the Australian outback and the deserts of the southwestern U.S. are said to be but a few examples of the devastation that resulted. The sub-cities were created as refuges for the people and as safe havens for sacred records, teachings and technologies that were cherished by these ancient cultures. It is believed that the great kingdom of Lemuria, which was located in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, was destroyed by Atlantis in a great war that led to a cataclysmic destruction of Atlantis and Mu. Mu was a great city on the surface of what is now the Gobi Desert. It had two satellite cities by the name of Agartha Alpha and Beta that survived the destruction. The inhabitants of Agartha are said to have scientific knowledge and expertise far beyond that of the people who live on the surface of the planet, lost technology from the days of Atlantis. The descendants of ancient Lemuria now live in peace in subterranean caverns. The leaders of these states, variously called ascended masters, guardians of the tradition, psychotelios or the perfected ones, the shining ones, the ancients, the watchers, the immortals, the monitors, the hidden directorate, the children of Seth, etc., all follow what is known as the ancient path and do not interfere in the lives of humans that live above the surface. Nor is there any interaction between them. There are no entrances to Agartha Alpha and Beta from any other part of the planet. The only entrances are in the Gobi Desert itself and are secured by illusory technology that is beyond the comprehension of modern science. The Tibetans refer to the cities of Agartha as Shambhala and have believed for centuries in their existence as reservoirs of ancient knowledge and advanced technology. Tibet. In Tibet, there is a major mystical shrine also called Patala, which is said by the people there to sit atop an ancient cavern and tunnel system, which reaches throughout the Asian continent and possibly beyond. The Nagas also have an affinity with water, and the entrances to their underground palaces are often said to be hidden at the bottom of wells, deep lakes and rivers. Inhabitants the Old Ones. In an article entitled The Hollow Earth, Myth or Reality for Atlantis Rising, Brad Steiger writes of the legends of the Old Ones, an ancient race that populated the surface world millions of years ago and then moved underground. The Old Ones, an immensely intelligent and scientifically advanced race, Steiger writes, have chosen to structure their own environment under the surface of the planet and manufacture all their necessities. The Old Ones are hominid, extremely long-lived, and predate Homo sapiens by more than 1 million years. The Old Ones generally remain aloof from the surface peoples, but from time to time, they have been known to offer constructive criticism, and it has been said, they often kidnap human children to tutor and rear as their own. Buddhist theory. It is believed to be a race of supermen and superwomen who occasionally come to the surface to oversee the development of the human race. It is also believed that this subterranean world has millions of inhabitants and many cities, its capital being Shambhala. Ancient philosophy states that Agartha was first colonized thousands of years ago when a holy man led a tribe to the underground. The people have scientific knowledge and expertise far beyond that of the people who live on the surface of the planet. Hindu. The Ramayana, one of the most famous texts of India, tells the story of the great avatar, Rama. It describes Rama as an emissary from Agartha who arrived on a Vimana. In India there is an ancient belief, still held by some, in a subterranean race of serpent people who dwell in the cities Patala and Bhagavati. According to the legend, they wage war on the kingdom of Agartha. The Nagas, according to the deep dwellers, are described as a very advanced race or species, with a highly developed technology. They also harbor a disdain for human beings, whom they are said to abduct, torture, interbreed with and even to eat. The entrances. While the entrance to Bhagavati is somewhere in the Himalayas, believers assert that Patala can be entered through the well of Sheshna in Benares, India. Says William Michael Mott in The Deep Dwellers, according to herpetologist and author Sherman A. Minton, as stated in his book Venomous Reptiles, This entrance is very real, with 40 steps which descend into a circular depression, to terminate at a closed stone door which is covered in bas-relief cobras. As science and science fiction merge, we unravel the ancient mysteries of the human experience. If indeed entities exist beneath the surface of the planet, they would not live in molten rock but in spaceships. And as the tectonic plates are breaking, it is either by their doing, knowing that the consciousness hologram that creates this reality, is ending so they no longer have to monitor from below, or they emerge as the plates naturally break apart. Hollow Earth theories always propose a central sun, aliens, and mythical subterranean cities and civilizations that some believe could link science and pseudoscience if physically discovered. Glaciers at both the Arctic and Antarctic regions are melting down at an accelerated rate, which will reveal the truth behind this mystery and its metaphoric connections to other creation myths in the story of humanity's journey on planet Earth. According to the Hollow Earth hypothesis, planet Earth is either wholly hollow or otherwise contains a substantial interior space. The hypothesis has long been contradicted by overwhelming observational evidence, as well as by the modern understanding of planet formation. The scientific community has dismissed the notion since at least the late 18th century. The concept of a hollow Earth still recurs in folklore and as the premise for a subgenre of adventure fiction. It also features in some present-day pseudoscientific and conspiracy theories. Underground civilizations link with the hollow Earth theory. There are supposedly races that exist in subterranean cities beneath planet Earth. Very often, these dwellers of the world beneath are more technologically advanced than we on the surface. Some believe that UFOs are not from other planets, but are manufactured by strange beings in the interior of the Earth. Conventional hollow Earth theories. Early history. In ancient times, the idea of subterranean realms seemed arguable, and became intertwined with the concept of places such as the Greek Hades, the Nordic Svartalfheim, the Christian Hell, and the Jewish Sheol, with details describing inner Earth in Kabbalistic literature, such as the Zohar and Hesed-Lavrom. Edmund Halley in 1692 put forth the idea of Earth consisting of a hollow shell about 800 kilometers, 500 miles, thick, two inner concentric shells and an innermost core, about the diameters of the planets Venus, Mars, and Mercury. Atmospheres separate these shells, and each shell has its own magnetic poles. The spheres rotate at different speeds. Halley proposed this scheme in order to explain anomalous compass readings. He envisaged the atmosphere inside as luminous, and possibly inhabited, and speculated that escaping gas caused the aurora borealis. De Camp and Ley have claimed, in their Lands Beyond, that Leonhard Euler also proposed a hollow Earth idea, getting rid of multiple shells and postulating an interior sun 1,000 kilometers, 600 miles, across to provide light to advanced inner Earth civilization, but they provide no references. However, in his letters to a German princess, Euler describes a thought experiment involving a patently solid Earth. De Camp and Ley also claim that Sir John Leslie expanded on Euler's idea, suggesting two central suns named Pluto and Proserpine. This was unrelated to the dwarf planet Pluto, which was discovered and named some time later. Leslie did propose a hollow Earth in his 1829 Elements of Natural Philosophy, pp. 449–453, but does not mention interior suns. 19th century. In 1818, John Cleves Symmes Jr. suggested that the Earth consisted of a hollow shell about 1,300 kilometers, 800 miles, thick, with openings about 2,300 kilometers, 1,400 miles, across at both poles with four inner shells each open at the poles. Symmes became the most famous of the early hollow Earth proponents. He proposed making an expedition to the North Pole Hole, thanks to efforts of one of his followers, James McBride, but the new President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, halted the attempt. Jeremiah Reynolds also delivered lectures on the hollow Earth and argued for an expedition. Reynolds went on an expedition to Antarctica himself but missed joining the great U.S. exploring expedition of 1838 to 1842, even though that venture was a result of his agitation. Though Symmes himself never wrote a book about his ideas, several authors published works discussing his ideas. McBride wrote Sim's theory of concentric spheres in 1826. It appears that Reynolds has an article that appeared as a separate booklet in 1827, Remarks of Sim's Theory, which appeared in the American Quarterly Review. In 1868, a Professor W. F. Lyons published The Hollow Globe, which put forth a Sims-like hollow earth hypothesis, but didn't mention Sims. Sims's son Americus then published the Sim's theory of concentric spheres to set the record straight. Recent theories. The Thule Society, which was well known by Adolf Hitler, reported much about Tibetan myths of openings into the earth. There is even a theory that Hitler ordered a research journey for such an opening in Antarctica, based on a speech of Admiral Dönitz in front of a German submarine in 1944. When he claimed the German submarine fleet is proud of having built an invisible fortification for the Führer, anywhere in the world. During the Nuremberg trials, Dönitz spoke of an invisible fortification, in midst of the eternal ice. As the story goes, Hitler and his followers wanted to create a race of super soldiers, an Aryan race, like the Atlanteans, to rule the world. They came to this conclusion through the acceptance of many occult beliefs and practices, including the hollow earth theory. There is a legend which says that Hitler and his chief advisors escaped the last days of the Third Reich by going through the opening at the South Pole, Antarctica, where they discovered an entrance to the Earth's interior. According to the Hollow Earth Research Society in Ontario, Canada, they are still there. After the war, the organization claims, the Allies discovered that more than 2,000 scientists from Germany and Italy had vanished, along with almost 1 million people, to the land beyond the South Pole. This story gets more complicated with Nazi-designed UFOs, Nazi collaboration with the people who live in the center of the Earth, and the possible explanation for Aryan-looking UFO pilots. In 2005, Stephen Curry Expeditions planned an expedition to the North Pole region to explore for a possible opening into the inner Earth. Brooks A. Agnew took over as leader on Curry's death in 2006, with the plan of taking 100 scientists and filmmakers to the supposed Arctic opening in 2009. An early 20th century proponent of Hollow Earth, William Reed, wrote Phantom of the Poles in 1906. He supported the idea of a hollow Earth, but without interior shells or inner sun. Marshall Gardner wrote A Journey to the Earth's Interior in 1913 and an expanded edition in 1920. He placed an interior sun in the hollow Earth. He even built a working model of the hollow Earth and patented it. Gardner made no mention of Reed, but did take Sims to task for his ideas. In the same time, Vladimir Abrushev wrote a fiction novel Plutonia, where the hollow Earth's interior possessed one inner, central, sun and was inhabited by prehistoric species. The interior was connected with the surface by a hole in the Arctic. Other writers have proposed that ascended masters of esoteric wisdom inhabit subterranean caverns or a hollow Earth. Antarctica, the North Pole, Tibet, Peru, and Mount Shasta in California, USA, have all had their advocates as the locations of entrances to a subterranean realm referred to as Agartha, with some even advancing the hypothesis that UFOs have their homeland in these places. Raymond W. Barnard. In 1964, Raymond W. Barnard, an esotericist and leader of the Rosicrucians, published The Hollow Earth, the greatest geographical discovery in history made by Admiral Richard E. Byrd in the mysterious land beyond the poles, the true origin of the flying saucers. Barnard tells stories about people who have entered the inner Earth and what has happened to them. It mentions a photograph published in 1960 in the Globe and Mail in Toronto, Canada, which shows a beautiful valley with lush hills. An aviator claimed that he had taken the picture while flying into the North Pole. In his Letters from Nowhere, Barnard claims to have been in contact with great mystics and secret ashrams and with Grand Lamas in Tibet. He was, in short, another Gurdjieff. Dr. Barnard died of pneumonia on September 10, 1965, while searching the tunnel openings to the interior of the Earth, in South America. Barnard seems to have accepted every legend ever associated with the hollow Earth idea, including the notions that the Eskimos originated within the Earth and an advanced civilization dwells within even now, revving up their UFOs for occasional forays into thin air. Barnard even accepts without question Shaver's claim that he learned the secret of relativity before Einstein from the Hollow Earth people. The Adventures of Admiral Byrd. Admiral Richard E. Byrd of the United States Navy flew to the North Pole in 1926 and over the South Pole in 1929. He referred to Antarctica as the land of everlasting mystery. In reference to the North Pole he wrote, "I'd like to see that land beyond the North Pole, it is the center of the great unknown." In his diary, Byrd allegedly tells of entering the hollow interior of the Earth, along with others, and traveling 17 miles over mountains, lakes, rivers, green vegetation, and animal life. He tells of seeing tremendous animals resembling the mammoths of antiquity moving through the brush. He eventually found cities and a thriving civilization. The external temperature was 74 degrees Fahrenheit. His airplane was greeted by flying machines of a type he had never seen before. They escorted him to a safe landing area where he was graciously greeted by emissaries from Agartha. After resting, he and his crew were taken to meet the King and Queen of Agartha. They told him that he had been allowed to enter Agartha because of his high moral and ethical character. They went on to say that they worried about the safety of planet due to bombs and other testing done above the surface by governments. After the visit, Byrd and his crew were guided back to the surface of the planet. Byrd stated that the North and South Poles are only two of many openings into the center of the Earth. He also wrote about seeing a sun below the Earth. Did Admiral Byrd fly over the North Pole or not? Live Science, April 16, 2013. On May 9, 1926, famed American explorer Richard Byrd took off from the Norwegian Arctic island of Spitsbergen along with his pilot, Floyd Bennett, in an attempt to be the first to fly to the North Pole. About 16 hours later, the pair returned to the island in their Fokker tri-motor airplane, the Josephine Ford, saying they had indeed accomplished the feat. Byrd submitted his navigational records to the U.S. Navy and a committee of the National Geographic Society, one of his sponsors, who confirmed the accomplishment, according to the Ohio State University libraries. Byrd was hailed as a hero, given the Medal of Honor, and went on to fly over the South Pole, as well as achieving many other polar exploration milestones. But from 1926 onward, not everyone thought that Byrd and Bennett actually made it to the North Pole. The controversy largely rested on whether the plane could have covered the distance in just 15 hours and 44 minutes, as the team recorded, when the flight was expected to take about 18 hours, given the ground speed of the aircraft. Concave hollow Earths. Humans live on the interior, with the universe in the center. Instead of saying that humans live on the outside surface of a hollow planet, sometimes called a convex hollow Earth hypothesis, some have claimed that our universe itself lies in the interior of a hollow world, calling this a concave hollow Earth hypothesis. The surface of the Earth, according to such a view, might resemble the interior shell of a Dyson sphere. Generally, scientists have taken neither type of speculation seriously. Cyrus Teat, an eccentric doctor from upstate New York, proposed such a concave hollow Earth in 1869, calling his scheme cellular cosmogony. Teat founded a cult called the Kirshon Unity based on this notion, which he called Kirshanity. The main colony survives as a preserved Florida State Historic Site, at Estero, but all of Teat's followers have now died. Teat's followers claim to have experimentally verified the concavity of the Earth's curvature, through surveys of the Florida coastline making use of rectilinear equipment. Several 20th-century German writers, including Peter Bender, Johannes Lang, Karl Neupert, and Fritz Braun, published works advocating the hollow Earth hypothesis, or Haltler. It has even been reported, although apparently without historical documentation, that Adolf Hitler was influenced by concave hollow Earth ideas and sent an expedition in an unsuccessful attempt to spy on the British fleet by aiming infrared cameras up into the sky. Wagner, 1999. The Egyptian mathematician Mustafa Abdelkader authored several scholarly papers working out a detailed mapping of the concave Earth model. C.M. Abdelkader, A Geocosmos, Mapping Outer Space into a Hollow Earth. 6 Speculations in Science and Technology 81-89, 1983. Abstracts of two of Abdelkader's papers also appeared in notices of the American Mathematical Society, October 1981 and February 1982. In one chapter of his book On the Wild Side, 1992, Martin Gardner discusses the hollow earth model articulated by Abdelkader. According to Gardner, this hypothesis posits that light rays travel in circular paths, and slow as they approach the center of the spherical star-filled cavern. No energy can reach the center of the cavern, which corresponds to no point a finite distance away from Earth in the widely accepted scientific cosmology. Admiral, Gardner says, would lengthen as it traveled away from the cavern and eventually passed through the point at infinity corresponding to the center of the Earth in the widely accepted scientific cosmology. Supposedly no experiment can distinguish between the two cosmologies. Martin Gardner notes that most mathematicians believe that an inside-out universe, with properly adjusted physical laws, is empirically irrefutable. Gardner rejects the concave hollow earth hypothesis on the basis of Occam's razor. In a trivial sense, one can always define a coordinate transformation such that the interior of the Earth becomes exterior and the exterior becomes interior. Such transformations would require corresponding changes to the forms of physical laws. The consensus suggests that such theories tend towards sophism. Contrary evidence. Gravity. The best scientific argument against that of a hollow Earth, or in fact any hollow planet, is gravity. Massive objects tend to clump together gravitationally, creating non-hollow spherical objects we call stars and planets. The solid sphere is the best way in which to minimize the gravitational potential energy of a physical object. Having hollowness is therefore unfavorable in the energetic sense. In addition, ordinary matter is not strong enough to support a hollow shape of planetary size against the force of gravity. Someone on the inside of a hollow Earth would not experience an outward pull and could not stand on the inner surface. Rather, the theory of gravity implies that a person on the inside would be nearly weightless. This was first shown by Newton, whose shell theorem mathematically predicts a gravitational force, from the shell, of zero everywhere inside a spherically symmetric hollow shell of matter, regardless of the shell's thickness. A tiny gravitational force would arise from the fact that the Earth does not have a perfectly symmetrical spherical shape, as well as forces from other bodies such as the Moon. The centrifugal force from the Earth's rotation would pull a person, on the inner surface, outwards if the person was traveling at the same velocity as the Earth's interior and was in contact with the ground on the interior, but even at the equator this is only 1/300 of ordinary Earth gravity. The mass of the planet also indicates that the hollow Earth hypothesis is unfeasible. Should the Earth be largely hollow, its mass would be much lower and thus its gravity on the outer surface would be much lower than it currently is. Seismic information. Although not visually observable, the core of the Earth is observable via vibrations, primarily from earthquakes, passing from one side of the planet to the other. Using this method, geologists have been able to establish the structure of mantle, outer core, and inner core known today. A hollow Earth would behave entirely differently in terms of seismic observations. Visual evidence. The deepest hole drilled to date is the SG-3 borehole, which is 12.3 kilometers, 7.6 miles, deep, part of the Soviet Kola Super Deep Borehole project. Thus, visual knowledge of the Earth's structure extends that far. Hollow Earths in fiction. The idea of a hollow Earth is a very common element of fiction, appearing as early as Ludwig Holberg's 1741 novel Nikolai Klim's Subterraneum, Niels Klim's Underground Travels, in which Nikolai Klim falls through a cave while spelunking and spends several years living on both a smaller globe within and the inside of the outer shell. Other pre-20th century examples include Giacomo Casanova's 1788 Icosamoran, a 5-volume, 1,800-page story of a brother and sister who fall into the earth and discover the subterranean utopia of the Megamakers, a race of multicolored, hermaphroditic dwarfs, Simsonia, a voyage of discovery by a Captain Adam Seaburn, 1820, which reflected the ideas of John Cleves Sims Jr. and some have claimed Sims as the real author. Edgar Allan Poe's 1838 novel The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, and George Sand's 1884 novel Laura, Voyage dans le Crystal, where unseen and giant crystals could be found in the interior of the Earth. More recently, the idea has become a staple of science fiction, appearing in print, in film, on television, in comics, role-playing games, and in many animated works. The idea is also used by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the creator of Tarzan, in a series of novels beginning with At the Earth's Core, 1914. Using a mechanical drill, his heroes discover a prehistoric world 500 miles below the surface. Lit by an inner sun, this inner Earth is called Pellucidar due to the constant light of the unsetting inner sun. There is also an inner moon which creates a land of the dreadful shadow by blocking the light of the inner sun for a portion of Pellucidar. Burroughs also makes use of the idea of openings at the poles, and has zeppelins travel to the interior of the Earth via these openings. There are 7 novels in the Pellucidar series. The Elder Race, The Shaver Mystery. One of the most controversial tales of inner Earth dwellers is the so-called Shaver Mystery. In 1945, Amazing Stories magazine, under the editorship of Ray Palmer, ran a story told by American writer and artist Richard Shaver, who claimed he had recently been the guest of what remained of a giant race called the Elder Race, or Titans, an underground civilization that lived in caverns under the earth. Shaver contended that the elder superior prehistoric race came to this planet from another solar system in our prehistoric past. After a time of living on the surface, they realized our sun was causing them to age prematurely, so they escaped underground, building huge subterranean complexes in which to live. Eventually, they decided to seek a new home on a new planet, evacuating the Earth and leaving behind their underground cities, a honeycomb of caves in the Earth, populated by artificial beings, the evil Darrow, detrimental robots, and the good Tarot, integrated robots. Shaver claimed to have met the Tarot. According to Shaver, the Darrow live there still, using the fantastic machines abandoned by the ancient races to torment those of us living on the surface. As one characteristic of this torment, Shaver described voices that purportedly came from no explainable source. Thousands of readers wrote to affirm that they, too, had heard the fiendish voices from inside the Earth. Despite the enormous popularity of the Shaver mystery in Amazing Stories, Palmer milked it for all it was worth, and more. The location of the entrance to this underground world was never divulged, although few really believed the story, and many suspect that Shaver may actually have been psychotic. Shaver always averred that his story was true. Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is a Mesoamerican god. Legend has it he flew off in a UFO for 8 days where he visited the inner worlds beneath the sea, returning to create man, leaving messages in the geometry of his design to be found at the end of time. This speaks of ancient alien theory and reality as a consciousness hologram, water, sea, collective unconsciousness, grids. Some believe the gray aliens are part of Hollow Earth theory. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe my channel for more videos.